Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are talking all about hopelessness. Now, if you feel like you're completely beaten, that no matter how hard you try, things are just not going your way, and so you want to give up, this teaching is going to be for you. We'll be looking at how you can deal with these feelings of hopelessness, manage them better so that you can shift your mindset and be much more stronger and more positive no matter what life throws your way. Okay, David, so this feeling of hopelessness, what's it all about? Where does it come from?
Well, that's a great place to start, Alex, on the name of the feeling. Because if you think about it, a feeling, an emotion, is a physiological response. It's a feeling of your body. And then we put a label on it. And in this teaching, we're talking about when people put the label of hopelessness. And it really gets them confused when they say the statements that we're using in this video. I feel hopeless, or I have feelings of hopelessness. And all that does is puts them on the carousel of despair. What I would prefer them to say is, I believe I'm hopeless, or this is hopeless, or life is hopeless. I choose, I believe, I choose, I think. And that moves the attention away from the carousel of despair. And then we can talk about the golden thread to get to the core of the belief.
And I guess what you're saying is the belief that the situation is hopeless, life is hopeless, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to get better. That belief is what is causing the discomfort, that's horrible, sinking feeling.
And that's exactly why I prefer to call it a red light feeling, because this helps you to clarify the beginning of the golden thread, which we can talk about as in a moment. Rather than saying, I feel hopeless, it's better to say, I am creating a red light feeling. And then you can say, why? Why am I creating this red light feelings? And then you can say what you just said, because I believe life is worthless, hopeless, I can't get anything and nothing works out for me, etc., etc., etc. But that difference at the beginning of the golden thread is so important. Stop using the F word. Just call it a red light feeling. Separate yourself, because these words like hopelessness, anxiety, depression, scared, frightened, they create a kind of they pull you down into the mire even more. Just acknowledge your feeling. I am not saying you're not creating a feeling. I'm saying you are creating a feeling. Just call it a red light feeling. Now let's find out what is the belief that's creating it.
But if I was a client coming to you, David, and you started to say that to me, and I would be like, but David, this situation is real. It's horrible. I've been working at it. Nothing's changing. I can see no good, no future. I can't pretend like things aren't bad. I can't just all of a sudden think positive when things in my life aren't positive. How would you respond to that?
Well, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what clients do say to me. I'm saying, well, why you got yourself into this kind of fog is because you're putting the beliefs and the emotions together. So the first criteria that I would stop is on the three principles that we talk about. Do you agree that you are the creator of your emotions? I'm not saying emotions are bad or you shouldn't create emotions. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying, do you agree that you create them?
Well, I would say if I was the client coming to you, I was in a bad situation, a bad life situation, that I am creating the feelings, the
Good.
uncomfortable, painful feelings that I'm labeling as hopeless, but that it's normal isn't it a normal response? Isn't it a normal emotional reaction to feel bad because my situation's bad?
Well, then I would say that's what the golden thread does. The golden thread is like a reverse engineering. Let's see whether your belief matches the situation that you're creating. Sorry, let's see if your belief is appropriate to the situation, or are you creating the situation with your belief? So that's why if you can move away from the feelings and go to the core belief, it makes things a lot clearer. And that's what the golden thread does. Why are you choosing to create that red light feeling? If you were my client, as I was saying, we have an agreement, and sometimes clients don't readily agree that they create their emotions. We have to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes while they try and explain emotions are in the air, or other people send their emotions, or it's the way they look. But then they understand that their emotions are created by their beliefs or their perceptions. Nothing wrong in that. Could be totally natural, could be appropriate. So let's just check out that belief or that filter, and then we can see whether it is appropriate to the situation you're facing.
Okay, so I guess what I've taken from that, David, is two things. The first thing is that if we're not careful, that yes, we could be in a bad situation, but that the emotional reaction, those red light feelings, if we're not careful, the red light feelings become the problem, the thing that kind of tires us out, wears us out, causes us discomfort, causes us sleepless nights, causes us kind of fuzzy thinking, not clear thinking, rather than the actual situation. So the emotions and the feelings of hopelessness and everything that goes with that, if we're not careful, they can become more of the problem than the actual real life problem itself. So that's the first thing. The second thing I've taken from what you've just said is that before we go any further, we need to almost stress test, to do a little check. Is what I believe about the situation, about my life, about how things are going wrong or will never get better, is it the truth?
Yes.
Is it the truth, or is part of my mind kind of over exaggerating, kind of going to worst case scenarios, going to extremes? Because if that is the case, then we need to bring it back into some kind of balance, a healthy balance.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Alex, because if you create the red light feelings, and I think you've used some terms like overwhelming or overpowering or great or intense, it's like throwing petrol on top of the fire. So let's take the petrol away and let's see what the fire's about. Let's do the golden thread. Let's start at the highlight red light feelings and then ask yourself, why am I choosing to create that feeling? And then you could say, as you just said, this situation I'm facing is, I can't cope with it. Then the next question, why can't you cope with it? See, now we're moving away from the emotions, and now we're getting to like the program, the engine room, what you really think and what you really believe, or your perception of the situation, your life, a person, a relationship, a job. It doesn't matter. This works equally as well on all of these things. So you're doing the golden thread, the self-inquiry, like the reverse engineering. I acknowledge you're having a very strong, intense red light feeling. Why don't we find out why you are creating that red light feeling? It might be appropriate. It may well be appropriate. I'm not saying it's not, but let's find out, because you can't change what you don't understand and accept. So let's understand why you think it's appropriate to create the red light feeling.
And David, would you say when you start doing that digging into the thinking and the beliefs, that a lot of this particular red light emotion of hopelessness comes from our inner child, our inner child fears?
Yes, I would say you can't say all of it, but in my practice, and I guess I attract clients who want to talk about the inner child, it's in the high 90% that we form our beliefs around the ages of 6 to 9 years old. These are really very important times in our life. And our beliefs are formed by our circumstances, by our family, by what we experience, and we create a set of beliefs. And they're like the blueprint or the computer program that's running our lives. And so we talk a lot in our videos and our podcasts about the 3 lies. So I would say the majority of my clients have one or all 3 of the lies. I'm not good enough. Number 1, I am not good enough. I cannot cope, or I'm unlovable or unworthy. And I find that most of my clients, when you do the golden thread, it goes down to one of those 3 core beliefs that they developed in their childhood. And then that becomes the lens, the focus that they see the world, themselves, relationship, jobs, and all of that. They see through that lens. And so what I find a lot of the time, not every time, but a lot of the time, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They discount all the good things that's happened in their life, all the positive things, and they focus on the negative things, which proves the lie. And that really is what the golden thread is so powerful. And once I can teach a client this is something you can do for yourself. It's just a self-inquiry question. It's a meditation. Oh, why do I believe that? Oh, where did I get that belief from? You usually find, not every time, but you usually find it's been inherited from your family, from your dynamics, what you experience, and you said something to yourself. That self-talk that we call the vow, there's something missing in me, there's something wrong with me. And then that's the lens you look through life.
I can certainly see how that inner child part of our mind or our ego, this idea of selectively searching out for things to prove that everything's going wrong, not looking at the bigger picture, not seeing some of the positives that are going on in life that are happening around us. I know there's this, I'm going to use the word natural, but I know you're going to correct me, this thing whereby when we're under pressure or in a challenging situation, it's almost as if our inner child gets engaged. And it's almost as if that when the inner child takes over, it then starts searching around for more problems. This is a bad situation and it's worse because nothing else is going right and something else might go wrong. And it's like the inner child starts to embroider this elaborate worldview of negativity, of negative now, negative in the future, which is completely unhelpful. And it's no wonder we start to feel bad when we're only collecting, hunting and gathering for problems and negative things.
Well, one of the situations which I can help my clients with, we've talked about changing the label of the red light feeling. Don't call it hopelessness, anxiety, just call it a red light feeling. Then you can practice the golden thread. Why have I created that? What's the reason? Where did I learn that belief from? And the other part of this topic of this teaching that we're talking about is very important, because when you give it a name like I feel hopeless, or it's hopeless, or there's no hope, or the world's against me, or nothing works out right for me, this is the inner child speaking to you. And what I find, I would say again, the majority of the time, we misinterpret what the child is saying. The child is not asking you, that part of the mind, that subconscious mind that I want to label the inner child. He really should be saying to you, I don't like this situation. Can you help me deal with it? I need some assistance here. I need you to hold my hand and lead me through this situation. It could be being made redundant. It could be a breakdown in relationships. It could be your own physical health. It could be anything, because the inner child wants certainty. The inner child wants to be future-proofed. It wants to know what's going to happen and how it's going to deal with it, and it will think about it, all these things. So I would say the majority of the time, again, I want to pull away from every time because there's always things that prove it wrong. The majority of the time, when you deal with something like hopelessness, This is the inner child crying out, begging for attention, for guidance, for parenting. And as you know, we've done many videos in our archives on reparenting. This is the time you should be talking and communicating with the inner child. And this is where it goes wrong, Alex, because a lot of my clients see their inner child, see that inner voice, see those feelings as the enemy, as something to be avoided, something to run away from, something to squash down either by drugs or avoidance or whatever, where it should be the other way. You should be approaching it. You should be going towards it. I've said this on many, many teachings. When I'm working with a client as on the inner child, when I can speak to the child part of my client's mind, and it starts speaking to me, and we can ask it questions, to me, it seems like we're walking down cellar steps, and we go down into this very dark, dank, not pleasant cellar room. And in the corner there's this beautiful child, huddled up, absolutely terrified, doesn't know how to deal with, has not had correct emotional education or any education about how to deal with reality in life. And it's just crying out through anxiety, through fear, through hopelessness, through anything, vulnerability, any of those words. That's why those words get you confused. And you can't deal with a child in the way it should be dealt with, which for me is sitting down. First of all, giving it a hug. Give your child a hug. Why can't you love your inner child? Why do you see it as something to be avoided, as a devil or a demon, when it's beautiful? Give it a hug and then just sit with it and talk to it. Now, like all children, it's not going to immediately tell you the problem. And for many of you, it's like when a physical child comes home from school and you say, oh, so how did the day go? And they go, nothing, I have nothing. You've got to learn to deal with it, listen, understand the language of the inner child. And then you can help to deal with the unresolved issues. And those unresolved issues will go back to childhood, will go back to parental authority figures, what they were taught, what they perceived by their parents not loving them or not giving them attention. And this has formed the belief system that now is guiding their lives.
And David, what you said about, I mean, we've got so many teachings in our archives, and I'll put a link in the show notes to all our inner child teachings so you can begin to do that inner child reparenting work that David has touched upon. But David, the point you made about how when our inner child takes over like that and the inner child fears take over and we have the imbalanced thinking, which then creates the painful, uncomfortable emotions. In this case, we are labeling them hopelessness. But how many people as a default turn to drink, drugs, overeating, overspending as an avoidance to try and squash down the uncomfortable, painful emotions?
Yes.
I mean, it's so sad because, as you said, it's just the fearful inner child crying out for help, crying out for some guidance, crying out for someone to listen, for us to listen, for the adult, the wise kind of adult part of us to reassure the child that we will cope, that things may not be good now, but things will get better, that, you know, there is good stuff in life, and to not let the inner child just continue down the train track of negative, worry, worst case scenario, you know, and because if we do that, everything then just spirals out of control.
Well, if you view it from the image that I painted, from an inner child's point of view, stuck in the corner of this dark, dank, horrible cellar, life does look hopeless. It's on its own. It can't trust anyone. And that's normally one of the first things that you have to do as the spiritual adult to your spiritual child, is build up a trust. Because for many years, many of my clients have just been ignoring them, all for the reasons that you just said. And so the child's not going to suddenly say, oh, yes, okay, I trust you. It takes a few, perhaps weeks or even a month to work with your child to build up that trust. Because what you've got to do is hold their hand, show them love, show them compassion. But the most important thing, you have to resolve their issues. Just by giving them love and telling them that everything is going to be all right, your inner child is not stupid. They have real issues, and you have to give them the techniques to deal with those issues, such as we're talking about. Well, the number one thing that the inner child will want is certainty. I want to know what's going to happen. So we have to sit with him and have to say, I'm sorry, I have to be truthful. We don't know what's going to happen. In fact, it would be a terrible world. It would be a horrible world if we knew exactly what was going to happen at all times. We live in a world of the unknown, of complete change, and that's what makes it exciting. And now you can start to teach the inner child the value of the unknown. You can start to teach it that we live in a universe of transformation. Things are always changing. So and then I'm going to go back to my Taoist analogy. I know we're going to drive everybody mad, but we're on the river. Now we're on the river, and we've got to navigate down through this river. Yes, you're right. You're right, sweetheart. There are rocks in this river. There are crocodiles, maybe. So we have to learn how to deal with that. We can't just sit in the corner and shut ourselves down and expect the universe and reality to change because we don't like it. And those are the type of the unresolved issues you have to work with the inner child. And that's the emotion education and the reparenting.
And David, there's a beautiful spiritual lesson that I really like about, and it's really for times when we believe that nothing's going right and there's no progress. We can't perceive, we don't feel like there's any progress. Nothing's going in the right direction. And that actually all the while, the universe is kind of working for us. Things are happening, but just not in the way that we want to expect, or the time we want or expect.
Well, that's the teaching of Taoism, and the whole teachings that we do these teachings on is to align yourself with that natural flow of the universe. That's what Wu Wei means, being in your flow, understanding the flow, and understand why you're resisting it. And that's another good reason why I call it a red light feeling. It's telling you that somewhere in your belief system, you are creating a resistance to the flow of the universe. And so the inner child will tell you that once you start speaking to them, and they will say things like, it's not fair, it's unjust, it shouldn't be like that. I should have had this, they should have had that, they had more than me, I didn't have enough, I was not given this, they were given. They'll have this set of childlike beliefs, the way that they believe reality should be. And that really is the work. That's the work I really enjoy working with my clients. The process is to get down, to gain the trust of the inner child, the subconscious mind, and to resolve those issues. Because the truth is, and I'll say this, the universe, reality, the river, whatever it is, won't go the way that you want it to. You can create as much red light feelings as you want. You can have squealing piglets. You can have temper tantrums. The river just flows. And we've got to teach a child, wouldn't it be better to navigate the river? Wouldn't that be a better way? And then we've got to stand by their side. And again, this is what a lot of my clients don't want to do. They say it's too difficult. They find it easier to spend hours and hours and hours worrying, fretting, creating these hopelessness, but they won't spend even a little bit amount of time working on the inner child and resolving these issues.
And that, I guess it's a childlike perception that our inner child holds on to, that 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old part of our psyche that's still there, that believes everything should go right all the time, in the way it wants it to go, in the time it wants it to go. And that the inner child, when things don't go the way it wants or expects, that's when it goes into fear mode. That's when it clamps up. That's when it starts giving you even more worst case outcomes. But like, how many times have bad things happened that we didn't want to happen, and that in a period of time later, we've been able to reflect and see that it's taken us on a different journey to a better place, but not a place where we expected to be.
And isn't that more exciting? Because if you can map out your life every day, every hour, every week, every month, and you can map it out and know exactly what's going to happen and all the bad things and all the good things that's going to happen, then really what life is about. And as you quite rightly said, and this is why the three lies have never made any sense to me. And it's amazing that so many people still hold on to them. I can't cope. I always say to my clients, to the contrary, you are a coping machine. You've always coped. And any client, and most of mine have come through a totally dysfunctional childhood with real serious problems of abuse of many kinds, telling me they can't cope is nonsensical, because they're not a victim. They're victorious. Because how did they get through that? And some of the stories that I hear, I'm just amazed how they managed to get through that period is in their lives. And then to come out the other end, Alex, and try and convince me they can't cope is nonsensical. It doesn't even make sense. So you're always coping. All we're talking about is coping in the flow, coping with ease, coping authentically, and opening the inner child up to a part. And this is a kind of the life lesson here on this teaching. The inner child has never accepted the concept of what I call Shen, their spirituality. They see things in a very materialistic way. That's why social morals and values is very important to the inner child, the way they look, how tall they are, how fat, how thin, whether they're beautiful or not beautiful, whether they're successful, what job they've got. For the inner child, that's very important because they're always CCJing, comparing, criticizing, being judgmental. This is the inner child, CCJ, comparing, criticizing, and being judgmental. And when you're having that inner child conversation, those are the times that you can open them up to a much more important part of their lives, which is their Shen, their innate value and worth. And that's who they really are. And that's part of resolving the issues.
And so really what we're talking about here is, life challenges don't go away when you've done this inner child work, when you've communicated with your inner child. But what does go away is the strength and the pervasiveness of the red light feelings, because you're more focused that you will cope, you can cope, and that, this is part of the journey. This is challenging, this is uncomfortable, but I'm going to go through this situation with a greater sense of ease, acceptance, and I will remain positive for the future.
That's right, Alex, because challenges will always be there, challenging situations, challenging people. And when you've got this mindset of hopelessness that we're talking about, all you're doing is making the challenge much worse. It's like you're pulling an anchor along with you instead of dealing with the challenge, with a flow, with an ease, with a smile on your face, being able to find a authentic and unique resolution. And this comes down to, again, Shen, believing in yourself, knowing that you have everything that you need. You are awesome and you are amazing. And this is what it's so difficult to get over to clients, because they've spent so much of their lives telling themselves the opposite, when in actual fact, if you look at what they've achieved, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And it's just changing that. Well, it's not even changing, to be honest. Perhaps that's the wrong word. It's widening the perception, seeing everything that is at your disposal, not just the negative, but the positive, and then finding your flow through that.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And as I say, I will put a link in the show notes to our inner child teaching playlist to help support you with this topic and other related teachings as well that will help you with this. I really, really hope you have benefited from this teaching. Please do let us know and perhaps share the teaching with someone else who you think it may also help. David works every week with clients all over the world via Zoom video call. If you'd like to learn more about David's consultations, I will also put a link to more information in the show notes. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.